from Councillor Allison. Do I have someone move that way? Thanks, Councillor Lynn. Someone like to second that? Councillor Fabio, all those in favour? Enjoy your holiday. Oh. Councillor, we move on to the confirmation of our minutes. The confirmation of the minutes of the confidential meeting on the 28th of May. Would someone like to move that those minutes be a true and correct record of that meeting? Councillor Bill, someone like to second that? Councillor Alderson, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. And we have a second resolution there for the minutes of the meeting of the special meeting of council held Tuesday the 4th of June 24 to be confirmed as a true and correct record of that meeting. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Dean. Someone like to second that? Thanks, Councillor Bill. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thanks, Councillor. So we move on now to the communications and the Mayor's communications. I'm going to keep it brief. We've got a lot on our plate tonight, councillors. As I normally say after this has happened, we had an Australian citizenship ceremony in this very chamber a couple of days ago, and I must thank Caitlin and Corey for an excellent presentation of the chamber itself, with all of the things that are needed to make people feel special. We had 2 new citizens, and they had their families with them as well. It was a lovely occasion, and it's certainly, as Mayor, it's the most privileged job and the most pleasurable job that I have to undertake. Still get a bit nervous with it, of course, because these people are taking a big plunge, and you want to do it right. But no, it was really, really good, and I thank Corey and Caitlin very much for the presentation of the chamber. We had a Northern New York LGA board meeting at Quorn in the Flinders, and what a town! That is, they have really come of age, and they're really kicking goals up there at the moment with how they've upgraded that town and their main street, and what they're doing for tourism as well. I ran the Pitchy Ritchie Marathon 11 times from Port Augusta to Quorn, and where we had our meeting was in the old Quorn Football Club rooms there, and it brought back a lot of memories, I can assure you. But they've done so much work, and it was a great credit, and their mayor from up there is on the Northern New York Local Government Association board, and he's a dynamic mayor. We've had a little bit of publicity through the Bunyip newspaper, a little bit through the Leader. I'm quite sure we'll have a lot more after tonight's meeting with our budget discussions, etc. And further, you may recall that at our last meeting we had Sean Leadham from the Celtic Club in South Australia, provide a presentation with the option of looking at reinventing the Celtic Festival back into Kapunda. I said I would, and I did. I met with Sean after that. He's very enthusiastic, and a couple of the things that he raised at our council meeting here were brought to my attention pretty quickly, like closing the roads and so forth, which is always a bit of a danger. However, we had a great conversation. He's extremely enthusiastic, and I added to that to sort of let him keep planning and keep the enthusiasm up there. It'd be lovely to see that festival reinvented, and Sean now is well aware of the obstacles that may be in place to do just that, and road closures being probably the biggest one. So that was about all from me for this month. Are there any questions, councillors, on any of that? If not, elected members, or any elected members like to report on something? Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Yeah, I was asked by you, Mayor Bill, to open the Gawlerra Brewery, saying you couldn't do it, which is in the southwestern area of our council, and it's a venture by a young couple down there, and it's been a booming success the last 2 weeks. They had to double the car park space in the first week. Now handles about 70 cars, and it's jam-packed every weekend. So if you want to have a good some nice beer and coffee and pizzas, head down to Gawler Brewery.
And I missed that. I had to go to Corn. Thanks, Councillor Bill, for that. Anything further, councillors? If not, we've got two deputations or presentations, I say, this evening. One from Rebecca Ebert, representing St Kitts Preservation Society, and one from Mary Morris, representing the Twin Creek Wind Farm, a Hamburg District Residents Group. I'm going to ask the ladies, with their permission, which I've received, to do their presentation first, and then we'll open up for questions from the floor after both presentations have been conducted. I think we'll find, because the subjects are quite different, but they are interlinked, it might be easier if we can get a good understanding of both at the same time before we ask questions, in case we're starting to ask the same question twice. So I think we decided that Rebecca would be the first cab off the rank. So welcome, Rebecca, and we look forward to hearing what you've got to say from the St Kitts Preservation Society point of view.
Great, thank you. I'll try not to step back because I tend to be quite loud. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I am speaking on behalf of the St Kitts Preservation Society. It's a community group which aims to preserve the historical and environmental significance of St Kitts. So the little handout on your desk with the lizard on the front, little guy, that's in relation to my presentation tonight. And you'll just see on the second page, everyone here will be probably aware of St Kitts, but I've just put a yellow dot, and I know the Light Council's a big district, just so you can get a sense of where we are actually talking about, up in the top right-hand side of that second page. So through our interest in the development of the Twin Creek Wind Farm, we've gained a greater understanding of some of the endangered species in St Kitts. This includes the pygmy blue-tongued lizard. So this tiny lizard was previously considered extinct until a small number of populations were discovered in South Australia, some of which are located within the Light Regional Council. The species is now listed as endangered under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. According to the Federal Department of Environment and Energy, all known habitat for the pygmy blue-tongued lizard is considered critical to the survival of the species. But the most southern habitats, namely those within the Light Regional Council, are among the most significant, as these habitats may become refuge areas if the species distribution contracts due to climate change. Furthermore, according to the South Australian Department for Environment and Water, beyond the known locations on private properties, pygmy blue-tongued lizard populations have also been recorded in council roadsides in and around St Kitts, including on Mosey Road and Flagstaff Hill Road. It is here that the aims of the St Kitts Preservation Society and the Light Regional Council align. As described in the Council's strategic plan, one of the Council's key priorities includes a focus on the preservation of biodiversity. This is further endorsed in the Council's Environmental Sustainability Strategy and Action Plan, which seeks to identify opportunities to increase biodiversity across the Council. In this regard, the St Kitts Preservation Society would like to propose that the Light Regional Council establish a working group and allocate sufficient budget to liaise with any relevant state or federal bodies to survey any known or likely habitats, roadside habitats, and set up a program which will monitor and conserve any identified populations of pygmy blue-tongued lizards. In conclusion, identifying and conserving these roadside populations provides the Light Regional Council with the perfect opportunity to not only achieve their strategic aims, but to also make an enormous contribution to the survival of an endangered species. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, and we may ask some questions a little bit later on that. But thanks for your presentation and your passion to what you're saying to us. I'll now introduce Mary Morris. It's nice to see you again, Mary, and welcome.
Thanks. I'll just turn around. Okay, so thank you. So I'm Secretary of the Handsborough and Districts Residents Group. We're here to talk about unacceptable visual impact of the proposed Twin Creek wind farm on the Barossa Character Preservation District. Now we know that the wind farm, the most southern point of the wind farm is that little green dot up there, and the purple is the Barossa Character Preservation District. And we acknowledge that the footprint of the wind farm is not within the Character Preservation District, but that there are impacts extending into the Character Preservation District from the wind farm, considering that a new application has been lodged for a revised proposal, which is 220 metres tall, where the previous one was 180, and they've been moved closer to the Barossa Valley. Some turbines have been removed from the northern area and put down the southern area. So I think now there'll be 19 turbines in Light Council, whereas previously I think there were about 11. So that's where the most southern point of the wind farm layout sits relative to the Character Preservation District. So the most southern turbine on the layout we've been given is turbine 42, and that is 4.7 kilometres from the Character Preservation District. And we know that the reports from the visual impact reports from the company in the past have said for the previous wind farm that the impact within 5 k's on the area is substantial. And we know that the turbines have increased in size by 40 metres in height and moved closer to the Barossa since then. So we know that people in the Barossa Character Preservation District will be experiencing a substantial impact from the new proposal. They also said that between 5 and 10 k's, the impact will be moderate. So there's quite a bit of the Character Preservation District which will be impacted to a moderate extent. So because we haven't been able to get, oops, that's the wrong slide. Go backwards. Whoops, what have I done? We haven't been able to get montages from the company at this stage because they say they're still organising the layout. So what we've done is we've engaged a cartographer to look at the elevation of where the turbines sit and what you'll see from within the Barossa Valley. So that is from the Coonunga Tukapunda Road, and basically you'll see to some extent most of the turbines, and you'll some of them you'll see pretty much all of them. So this guy that's done that, Stuart Adrian, if you're familiar with the 3D wine
All right.
The wine areas map in the Barossa cellars, he's created that. So as you can see from the little map in the corner, that's what you'll be seeing from that point near Belvedere Road. So the next slide shows the distance to the Barossa cellars, so that's about 20 k's. The company says the visibility, the thing will be slight. However, if you look at some of the photos we've got in the handout I've given you, you'll see that from Barossa Cellars, you can see that whole range. And so none of those turbines will be obscured from your view. They basically, if you look at the Mount Rufus Tower, there'll be several of them will be 150 metres taller than the base of the Mount Rufus Tower. So you'll see them from wherever you are. So a similar, same again, that's done by the cartographer. So put that in your little handout. So basically what we're saying is that this wind farm is going to have a significant visual impact on the Barossa Character Preservation District. And we know that the footprint of the wind farm isn't in the district, but there'll be a substantial impact outside it. So we've looked at the Light Council's strategy for 22 to 27, and we know that the Light Council has undertaken to be proactive when assessing developments against the Preservation Act. I know Bill said earlier, our hands are tied in this matter. We'd just like to talk about some other councils who've spoken out against inappropriate siting of wind farms in their area. Recently, the District Council of Grant has opposed the proposed wind farm offshore there. They enlisted the support of the state government to oppose that wind farm. Barossa Council has moved a motion requesting that the relevant authority, when assessing this project, has regard to the objectives of the Preservation District. And finally, City of Mount Gambier, excuse me, their submission about the offshore wind farm. Council confirms in principle it's not adverse to renewable energy projects where appropriate. But in that case, the council said there's potential significant environmental and economic benefits that it's not outweighed by the negative. So what I'd like to ask the council is that I've given you a little handout with a map here which shows the visual impact of where you'll see the turbines from. That's RES's base map. What I've done is put some locations on there in the Light Council where you can have a clear view of that range. So basically points like all along the Kapunda Trua Road, on the Anguston to Newry Road near the cemetery, near Vintners, you can see that the whole range there is quite visible. So the other thing is I've given a little handout of so like locations around the Light Council area within the Character Preservation District, plus Barossa Cellar, where you've got a really clear view of the skyline, and that is where those 42 turbines will sit, 220 metres tall, 180 metre fan diameter. So I would just really encourage elected members to look at those photos and take a drive around those locations that I've highlighted on the map and just make up your own mind about whether you think that will be a significant impact for the Character Preservation District. And I guess some options would be the Light Council is a referral body. In the past, in the previous application, they relied on the WACS report, WACS visual impact report, and didn't do their own visual assessment. A suggestion could be that Light could get independent advice about what somebody else who's not doing the work for the wind farm thinks about the visual impact on the Character Preservation District, especially considering the WACS report for the wind farm said the main impacts are to the east and west, and basically played down any impacts over the other side of the hill, which is the floor of the Barossa Valley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you also for the handouts. They're going to be very valuable and for councillors to have a good look at that and get a really clear understanding. I might open up for questions from the floor, councillors, if you do have any. Questions, councillors? If not, I thought the presentations said it all pretty much, and certainly with the handouts. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Rebecca, you're asking for a report into the pygmy lizard. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a university research people, or what are you concerned about?
So I assume that you can hear me. So I would look to see or envisage the council as being the driving force in coordinating surveying of the habitats where there's known pygmy blue tongues or likely to be pygmy blue tongues. So in doing that, I would expect the council to engage with state bodies, maybe with federal bodies. You know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Like if we know that there's certain locations, I just think at the minute they seem to be a little bit lost in how we protect them. So in that's why I talked about a budget, because I would, have an independent group to come in, survey them, monitor them, and I guess factor them into the council's biodiversity plan. And I guess if I was in the council as a flagship, as look what we've got and look what we've done. Because we know that things could happen on roadsides that could put them even more at risk. So to your question, would we engage a university? I think if there's specialist skills there, but I would probably think this is something we want to do independently and own.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Collin?
I've got more of a comment from before when we were studying the wind or the proposed wind farm. I thought it was very well investigated where the pygmy blue tongues are, because I think they're not so much on Ben Lomond, but they are in Twin Creek. There's a whole map we saw of where they are. And I think it's if there's a few on the road, I think they're obviously living in the same colony as the ones that live on Twin Creek. So I think we're just doing the same thing that's already been done.
Yeah, I guess I haven't given any considerable regard to the private properties because that's to do with other bodies. I guess in speaking to you tonight, I really want to focus on the areas where the council had some jurisdiction, is what I would say.
But the question would be, how did they know that there's blue tongues on the road?
So the Mount Lofty and Northern Adelaide, they've done some surveying independently. So they know that they're there.
So it wasn't the university that found them, it was independent of the university.
Yeah, I think it was the government. So they had a study. So I don't have access
so
to
my point is there's already a study.
Yeah, so I think it's great that they've been identified, but nothing's, as far as I'm aware, been done about it. So we could say, oh, well, if their habitat gets removed or gets whatever by truck or whatever, that's, we could literally wash our hands of it. Absolutely. But I think what an opportunity instead.
No, I think you're missing my point. My point is don't wash our hands of it. I think it's a responsibility of everyone that we do know what's there, how many are there, the whole map. And I think it's been done. I think the university spent a lot of time up there and it's really been, I think there's a lot of information if we were to go and want to find it already about the pygmy blue tongue lizard. So for Light Regional Council, in my opinion, to go and do another one would be, I think we'd have to go and see them first before we'd have to have a look at it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I don't know the extent of the surveying. I assume that the surveying was done in relation to private development, but I think the council has got the opportunity to extend that further and see where they are, if they're there, and what they can do. Because from what you're saying, it sounds like some of the populations have been identified. What then?
Well, they've already been on my property, so they've moved around, got similar areas that look like the area where the proposed wind farm's going, so they're already investigated other sites. As Andrew would be able to tell you, they've already done a lot of this stuff, so to me, I'm quite comfortable in what the information which is in the public already.
And what do you see doing about it then? Like, as a council who's got an endangered species on your roadside, what's the next step?
I might have to pull this up shortly, or we're getting into a bit of a debate now. I
Oh,
think.
okay. I'm just interested, that's all. No
You
worries.
you certainly are, and I think the questions are very good, and I think the responses were equally as good. So again, thank you for that, and thank you for the handouts as well. Councillor Fabio, you have a question?
Yeah, more so a comment. Firstly, Rebecca, thank you for the presentation. I'm a massive advocate for preservation of Indigenous species to Australia. I think Australia has got the worst rate of extinction across all animal species across the world. Far outnumbers places like Africa and things like that you would expect. And certainly our wildlife is very unique here in Australia and should be protected at all costs. In regards specifically to the wind farm, I think renewable energy is a fantastic thing. I'm a big supporter of it. I drive past the ones up near Burra, up on the hill, and I think they're a massive, they're a marvel to man's achievements and whatever, etc., etc. However, would I want to wake up every morning, open up my blinds, and be looking at one? Absolutely not. And when we talk about, we go out of our way and we talk heavily about the Barossa preservation area. It's not just the Barossa. I think it's the broader Light Regional Council. People have come here because they want a certain quality of life. There's people that move here for, not just for farming, but for respite and to get away from the hustle and bustle, and to wake up to see that thing in front of them, never mind, and I don't want to go down the path or the rabbit hole of speaking about, health implications or anything like that, which have been documented as well. But certainly from a visual perspective, I think they're an atrocity. In a country as big as Australia, that has got a lot of area where you could put these things and no one would see them for hundreds of miles. I think there's better places that they could be placed. And it's just a lazy, I think putting them nearby to places, to settlements and to towns and whatever, is just lazy planning because it's a cheap option. They don't have to run the infrastructure as far to the substations, etc., etc. But once they're there, they're there forever.
Councillor Fabio, what's your question?
I said it wasn't a question, Bill, Mayor Bill.
I know you did, but
I said it was
are you getting to one though?
I said it was a comment.
It's been more than a comment.
I prefaced it by saying it was a comment, so I'm almost done.
Thank you.
Please. So the decisions we make now regarding things like these wind towers, these windmill things, will have long-lasting implications to future generations. I think we need to be very wise in the decisions we make today.
Thank you, Councillor Fabio. You've obviously studied your subject and you have a passion for it. I commend that. Any further questions, councillors? If not, I have to thank you, ladies, very much for your presentation. Be assured that our council is very aware of biodiversity and what it means, and it's an important aspect of our operations also. And we have Andrew Philpott in the corner there to prove that. So we do take notice, and we have listened to what you have to say tonight, and we thank you very much for it. All the best. Councillors, we can move on now to our next matter. We have no adjourned business, but we move on to count up section 8, our action items. I'll move on by the bottom of the page as we normal practice. And the first one is page 7. Any matters on page 7 that you would like to question or have any comment to provide? Move to page 8. You on page 8? Oh, sorry, Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Just an update on the anticipated timeframe for the report on the RV park in Freeling.
Yeah, thank you, Kyron.
Yeah, through the chair, I think we should be on target for the next ordinary meeting.
Okay, and just another related one, thanks, Kyron. The secure and affordable housing, so that's still coming in July. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, councillor Michael. Anything further on that page, councillors? If not, I'll move to page 9. You on page 9? We've come a long way with our action items. It used to be 10 pages thick. I think it's a better format now also. So, okay, councillors, we move on to section 9, recommendations from our committees. First being the Audit and Risk Committee. There's a recommendation at the top of the page on page 10 that the agenda, reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee meeting held Tuesday 11th of June 2024 be received. Someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Simon. Someone like to second that? Thanks, Councillor Collin. Further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillors, recommendation 2 there is the reports and recommendations of the meeting held at the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee held Tuesday the 11th of June, numbered 1 to 3 as listed above, be adopted. I'll open that up for discussion, councillors. Are there any questions? Oh, sorry, it's on the second page. It's 1 to 4, councillors. On page 11, you'll find another recommendation. If not, I'll put I'll need a recommendation. Yeah, I've got a recommendation halfway down page 10 that says that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee meeting held Tuesday 11th of June 2024, numbered 1 to 4 as listed below, be adopted. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, would someone like to speak to that, Councillor Dean? Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor Lim, like to speak to that, Councillor Lim? Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to section 10, infrastructure and sustainability reports. Neil, section 11, strategy and economic development reports. I must commend our author, General Manager Kyron, for this report in particular. It's first one, it's outstanding, I thought, and it answers a lot of questions that I think have been, have been asked in this chamber previous, and I think we're coming to a pointy end of some of these particular matters. So thank you, Kyron. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Michael?
Just a couple, thanks, Mayor Bill. So just in relation to the discussion, the section on housing, it's noted that Light Regional Council is implementing most of the opportunities with the exception of exploring partnership opportunities and undertaking feasibility studies, which would require strategic support and associated funding allocation. When we receive the report on the secure and affordable housing, would it be possible to explore what that funding and what that strategic support would involve as part of that report? And then the second question relates to the discussion on the cycleway under infrastructure development. So is what this is saying is that there's a state bicycle fund that's been established and that councils can seek grants through that fund. But in order to do that, we would need to develop some preliminary design documentation or something, or does the grant allow us to do that?
Thanks, Councillor Michael.
Yeah, through the chair. So the State Bicycle Fund has 2 streams, essentially. They can be planning and design type projects, which are generally a precursor to capital infrastructure projects. and the other stream is actual capital infrastructure projects. So you can apply for either type of project under the program, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Kyron. Thank you, councillor Michael. No further question?
So do we intend to submit a grant application for that? Just noting the rest of the discussion around it being a priority project for 26 to 28.
Yes, I've got a draft application 90% completed. I'm just waiting on quotes for the planning and design component to inform the project budget. So yeah, I intend to submit that before the deadline, which is the end of the month.
Thank you, Kyron. Do you know any of the competitors in the funding round? How are we going to look? Yeah. Further question, councillor Collins.
I just reading, I see the Premier's going to fix the water problem, and he was announcing a function today. Is that, have you got any idea what that was, or his solution? Right? He's not talking about a pipeline or anything, because that's what's needed for us, isn't it? A pipeline basically from Twitter somewhere. Otherwise, we're not going to build too many more houses.
Through the chair, so our GM team was in pre-meetings today, so we had other staff attend that function. I haven't had the opportunity to get a debrief on how that event and what the announcement was, so I guess that would be provided in due course.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kyron. Is there any chance that we get perhaps a note sent around when we get some outcome? Could go around to the councillors? Because that might save a bit of ground too as well if we can get that in a fairly short time.
And I've got one
Councillor
more.
Collins.
I noticed you went to the Kapunda, what do they call themselves? The Small Business Alliance, or whatever it is. Or the Kapunda Business Alliance. Is there a concern about the number of shop closures in the main street in the near future?
Yeah, thanks, Kyron. I wasn't aware that there's real big drama in the main street. I wouldn't have thought. We've got a couple of shops that are up for lease, and we've got one that will be reopening very shortly, which was the old Fusion store. That's all a bit top secret at this stage, but they're doing a mighty job inside, so it's going to be probably something fairly special for the street to take up what was looking a bit drab from the outside. Quite a good service, the old Fusion shop, for a lot of people, but it was looking pretty drab, but it's all been done up now, so we'll see what happens there. But I'm not speaking on behalf of the Business Alliance, of course, because I'm not a member. But, I thought the main street was starting to come alive, to be honest.
I just think a cafe, I think Winston's is closing. I think Go to Neil's closing. Coven's closing. So they're just ones that I've been told in the last week that are closing. So I just wondered if
I might pass back to Kyron. I think he's probably more on top of it than I am.
Yeah, through the chair. So I'm not 100% sure on the KBA's position on that matter. I had a staff member attend the meeting, so I was sort of just going on the minutes. I guess from a council perspective, we have provided reports on sort of township main street precincts and what makes them vibrant and what council's role can be to help activate those. So I sort of see no change in position from management in terms of council's role to activate main streets and make them vibrant, but I think it's important and council's strategic plan would reflect that.
Councillor Kyron. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lynn?
Having a colour theme in the main street, changing, it says here, opportunity to develop a palette of colours for Main Street buildings to choose from to create a theme. How much of that was discussed?
Yeah, through the chair. Once again, I don't have the benefit of attending the meeting to appreciate the detail around that. I can only assume that, I guess the Business Alliance has a view on what would make a good visual main street in terms of colour of heritage sort of facades and those sorts of things, to potentially avoid some unintended consequences where you might get some very interesting colours that a building owner may wish to paint their building with. Sorry, I can't probably answer your question any further than that, unfortunately.
Councillors, could I suggest that we, Bridget Kimber, who you may be aware is the proprietor of the railway station, who has done some extremely good work in Kapunda since she's arrived in the last couple of years. She's the chair of the Business Alliance. It might be an idea if we invite her along to one of our meetings here, and she can explain and answer many of these questions, I'm quite sure, and in a very articulate way, because she's very bright. So we could do that. Councillor Michael?
Yeah, I guess just to pick up on Councillor Collin, and I guess, I noticed the same sort of situation emerging when I have occasion to cross the dreaded border into Gawler. And without foreshadowing, I guess, discussions around budgets and things like that, I have noticed that our commercial rate is substantially higher than, say, the Barossa, for example, which is uniquely positioned, or commercial businesses are uniquely positioned to capitalise on the Barossa. And so I guess that, without discussing the rates itself, I just wondered, is there a way that council can lessen the load for people who are looking to start or continue operating a business in Kapunda, for example, by, say, providing some form of reduction on some of these properties are leased. So I guess the intention would be that the incentive somehow goes back to the lessor, the tenant, based on, either attracting new businesses to Kapunda, retaining businesses in Kapunda, or if a business has experienced a downturn in turnover. Is council able to offer a grant or something like that? Is there a framework we can put around that? Because I'll be mindful of not having landlords who own strips of shops benefit from that without passing it on to the tenants. I don't know, it's a bit of an open question whether we need a report or you can answer that.
I think it's a very, very good question, Councillor Michael. Having been in business in this very main street, the rate is extremely high in comparison to some of our neighbours, and it might well be that we could say that we're only propping up the people that own the business and not the people who are actually running the business. But the people who are running the business actually pay those rates. So I think we could certainly put that in the consideration tin for sure. But I think if we brought Bridget Kimber along to this meeting, and these are questions that she could take on, and I'm sure she would have a very firm view on what's inhibiting progress to not just this main street here. I would think the shops up the top of Hewitt are probably not travelling all that kindly either. In Freeling, I think they're probably doing as good as anywhere. So it's a real problem with small regional country towns, main street shops. So I think we've got an obligation, I think, to do something about it if we're seeing there's a problem. And obviously it's been raised tonight in this chamber, so we should follow it up. Thank you.
Ability to provide some form of relief grant, something for the tenants of the buildings, or not?
That's a good question. Also, I might pass that to Kyron.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. There's a number of levers that could be pulled in that respect, from development or economic development incentives to rate rebates, discretionary rate rebates. But that's probably the area I would be suggesting, but it can certainly be explored further.
one of the things, of course, we do as a council, we're always trying to support special events and programs and so forth that bring more people to the town. Just the locals are not going to really support some of these businesses because there's just not enough of them. So we do need tourism to sort of really spike up and make a big difference, and it can. And that's why we've got plans in place to do just that. But we could use them more as well. I think Nigel might add something to what was just being discussed.
Yes, thanks, Matt. Bill. Just regarding the comment about the rates comparison, yes, you're correct. Commercial is certainly lower here, lower in Barossa. But you can't just compare the rate in the dollar there because they're fixed charge. But in the benchmarking we looked at a couple of months ago, the average commercial valuation in Barossa would pay $2,358 in rates, whereas it would be $2,988 in Light Regional Council. But the thing I'd like to highlight though is that residential rates are substantially higher in the Barossa. So I suppose that sort of implies some form of subsidisation for that regard. So that the overall mix, the average residential in Barossa last year, $2,721 in rates, would have been $2,045. So quite a substantial difference there. So the overall mix. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you.
Nigel. I don't quite get the same figures because I did happen to read the Barossa Council's agenda where they passed their budget, and the commercial shop rate seemed to me to be a lot more than that. But anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Well, Councillor Fabio,
I have a question through the chair, please.
certainly.
Is anyone from council contacting these exiting retailers and conducting some sort of exit interview with them to find out what their stuck points are, specifically if there's anything that's relating to the council, whether it be rates, car parking, colour combination of their shop fronts, etc. So the first question is anyone contacting these people? And secondly, if not, why not?
Thank you, Councillor Fabio.
Yeah, through the chair. So that's not part of our current program at the individual sort of business level. Our primary engagement is with the business alliances that can sort of look at common issues across businesses rather than addressing sort of specific business exits. That's something that we could bring into our program. We'd obviously have a look at that and see what resourcing it might require. But I guess at this point in time, our preference would be to work with the business alliances.
Just one further question or comment, I guess, related to that, if I may make a comment. Yourself being involved, per se, with Kapunda Business Alliance would be very well aware that not all shop owners on the main street are actually members of the Kapunda Business Alliance. So I guess this does lead into a question of how confident are you that the Kapunda Business Alliance is actually capturing the thoughts and feelings of every business owner that's leaving the town? Or are we only getting a small sample size?
Thanks, Councillor Fabio. Difficult one to answer. I know. Well, you might when he gets a chance to put his microphone on.
I guess the confidence level is only as confident as the business members that they have with the alliance. So, yeah, we haven't audited the business alliance's membership list to, ascertain whether that represents 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of businesses that are in Kapunda or the region. So, I guess that we're only as confident as the members that exist.
Thank you, Kyron.
Sorry, just
Thanks, Councillor Michael.
thanks, Mayor Bill. Just to pick up on that with Councillor Fabio, so a couple of things spring to mind. I mean, couldn't we just either walk up and down the main street and check in on the businesses, or just invite them all in here to sit down with you know, and just, you know, I don't know. I mean, to me, that just seems a simple way of engaging with them. As you say, you know, not all of them are part of the business alliance, and to get some feedback, or if we hear, as Councillor Collins indicated, there's 3 businesses, I mean, it's not a very big main street. You know, we find out, well, what are your issues, you know, a bit of a, and try and understand it a little bit more granular level, I think would be certainly something this council should be doing.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Further quick, Councillor Collins?
I think the problem is not the rates. I think the problem is visitation. I think rural or regional tourism in Australia in general has fallen a hole, and South Australia more particularly. So even visitation to Barossa has gone down, Clare's gone down, and we are copying it badly. That's just, it's people walk through the door. So that's the problem. So, you know, we spend all this money trying to get tourists here, all that sort of stuff. It hasn't worked. So, you know, what do we do now? That's the question.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. Further questions, councillors? If not, that was a report for information, I think. Where are we? We're part of, that formed part of the Strategy and Economic Development report. And there's a recommendation on page 15, councillors, that the council receives the Strategy and Economic Development reports and contents herein be noted. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Ling and Councillor Collins. Councillor Ling, would you like to speak to that? Councillor Collins, would you like to speak to it? Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Now we move on to reports for information. First one is the CEO's monthly report. Fairly straightforward. Any questions, councillors? Not, we'll move on to the next one. The Northern York Local Government Association Business Plan and Budget. Any comments on that, councillors? Not, we'll move on to the Roseworthy Water Scheme, June 2024 project update. And again, thank you so much, Corin, for this. I think the visuals too, you know, lay a really good picture of what this project's about, as well as the words. So thank you for taking the time and trouble to do that. Are there any questions, councillors, in relation to this project? Councillor Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. I recall seeing an earlier version of this report somewhere in a previous council meeting, and I recall it's significantly over budget. And I wasn't clear, because I think I had to leave the meeting early. It's not clear to me how the council is going to fund the difference or the shortfall. Can that be, can you maybe explain how we're going to do that?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Michael.
Yeah, so this is a public report that was written largely to mimic the confidential report that went to, I think, the last ordinary meeting of council, to, I guess, provide some public information.
I mean, just on that though, I mean, it says in here that cost escalations in the order of 40%. So I don't think I'm discussing anything here that isn't somewhat discussed in here.
Yeah. So the confidential report sort of did go into areas that council ought to consider in the future to address the cost escalation. So there'll be future reports coming to council with those options.
Further questions, councillors? The water scheme? Councillor Simon.
Yes, I do have a question. I first want to start with the comment. I would be on the record saying that we've sold the solution to the developer's problem, how to get rid of the water in Roseworthy, way too cheap. I've said that many times. Now it's common by us in the backside. And the solution that we have here is the shortfall difference is consuming the original project budget contingency, which means that the project enhancement are not likely to be funded. And here comes the sentence I find quite laughable, unless changes to the commercial agreements with project partners are negotiated. So if we would have negotiated better projects agreements with our project partners, we wouldn't be in this position. So I just wondered, what's the likelihood of those commercial agreements with the project partner to be negotiated?
Thanks, councillor Simon. Thanks, Corin.
Well, I guess, yeah, reports will be coming back to council with options around that. So that will be up to the council how it wishes to move forward on that front. In terms of a likelihood, as in terms of a probability, I probably can't give you that because it's a council decision. So that sort of sits with the council.
Further questions, councillors?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a quick, I mean, if the project escalation costs have gone up 40%, surely we had contracts for the work to be done, and were those contracts that flexible that they could ramp the prices up? If they were that flexible, how guaranteed are we that we're only seeing a 40% increase? I mean, have we got contracts for the rest of the work to be done at a set price, or how stable is the whole pricing situation?
Yeah, through the chair. So the implementation of the project is done by the private partner, Bunyip Water. So they are empowered to approach the market and get the best rates and outcomes they can. We oversee that process in terms of the value for money that they achieve. So I guess they are exposed to the same industry conditions at any point in time that other organisations are when they're procuring. So those market conditions might ease, or they may get worse, but they would be exposed to those market conditions at the time. So there'll be multiple stages to the project over time. So yeah, they may get better value for money or not so good value for money into the future. I guess that's difficult to predict.
Thanks, Corin. Councillor Michael.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, because I think Councillor Bill asked a good question there. So is it right to say that the council doesn't have risk given the project's being delivered through the PPP business? So to the extent that the cost escalation has grown by 40%, is that a risk that's managed by and dealt with by Bunyip Water with no upstream risk to the council?
Through the chair, I think it's difficult to answer that question with a simple answer, given the complexity of the agreements that are in place. So I think I'd like to take that one on notice, and it probably deserves a bit more detail in the response than what I can provide verbally in this meeting.
Thank you, Corin. Further questions, councillors? If not, we move on to our next matter as 12.4 is the boundary reform update. Have any questions in relation to boundary reform? Councillor Michael.
Always passionate about boundary reform, Mayor Bill, and always happy to stick the boot in too. So I'll just note here that the consultant was due to finally get around to engaging with the community of all things, and that is due to occur, by early July. I mean,
That's next week.
Next week. So do we know when it's actually going to happen? Or?
Yeah, that's a good observation, Councillor Michael. I'm a little bit disappointed with their approach to this whole thing. In the whole matter, I have not been approached once. As the mayor of the council, you would think you'd at least get a phone call from someone, but not once, not anything. VDO. I find that quite extraordinary because they are a very major company.
Yeah.
And I thought they would do business in a better manner than that.
I would have thought our local member would be more interested in it as well, but he's not.
Because this is, coming to a very pointy end. We would like to be involved as a council.
Yeah, through the chair, we have been approached by the Boundaries Commission recently, and it looks like we're targeting towards the end of July as a community engagement session. We're just trying to finalise that now, and hopefully we can do that soon and let elected members know at our earliest opportunity, but I would probably keep the 31st of July free.
Richard, you find them easy to deal with?
I'll take that question on notice.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, there's a recommendation 2/3 of the way down page 27. Oh, it's been moved by Councillor Lynn. Would someone like to second that? Councillor Collin, any further questions or comments? You don't like to speak to your motion? Second, just speak to the motion? No? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Thank you. And it was certainly an interesting range of reports for noting. The next one here, and thank you, Brandon. I see you sitting behind that chair over there. Brandon Elliott, our manager of General Inspector. The reports for decision, the first one being the Dog and Cat Management Breeder Reforms Amendment Bill 2024. There's a recommendation about halfway down page 28. Councillors, do we have any further reports, or staff, do we have any further reports since this has been published?
Through the chair, no, Mayor Bill, nothing to add to the report, thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Collin.
So what's going to be in the submission? So we're in favour of it, are we? Or because it's going to make, as a dog breeder, there's enough regulation anyway, isn't there? Is this going to make it harder? Like, who polices this stuff anyway? No one really cares, do they? So is it just making it harder? No one's doing it. Is it going to cost us more money to police it, or?
That's a good question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bill, and thank you, Councillor Ross. So in terms of the response, the conclusion articulates some points that I'll be looking to include in the submission that goes back in response to this, and it does ask questions similar to what you have in terms of who's takes on the lead responsibilities for, I guess, the day-to-day in terms of the breeding licensing and so forth. Expectations, though it's not quite as clear, I do expect that there'll be further duties that the board is seeking from council in respect to the administration and monitoring of the breeder licensing. There's some questions that we're posing and the conclusion about how that might be managed in terms of what that interaction looks like and what specific responsibilities are there. The licensing arrangements do talk about collection of funding, and we're asking or suggesting that we ask questions in relation to how that funding distribution might work to offset those costs that are likely to be attached to this. So there's a lot of practical questions still, I think, it's fair to say, around how this will work.
No, thank you, Craig. Councillor Michael.
So fundamentally, our submission relates to what resource burden or not these amendments would put on the council, and that's it. It doesn't go into a philosophical discussion about whether we agree with licensing or not. Your submission will just deal with the resourcing.
Yeah, so through the chair, I'm suggesting that first and foremost, we look at the practical aspects and the resourcing, but if council would like to add more to it around the nature and the intent, I mean, I'm in your hands in that respect, councillors.
No, look, I wouldn't, other than I would say that I think some regulation around, the breeding of animals or dogs or whatever, and the sale of them, people buying them in good faith, that they're being bred properly isn't a bad thing. But I don't know whether we need to go into that detail in terms of this submission here.
Thanks, Councillor Michael. Any further questions, councillors, or comments?
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just to relate to the press release out today about the new rental conditions for landlords and tenants, that a tenant can now have a pet in the house at his own volition or under some conditions. My question is, currently registration of animals relates to the owner of the property. How will that play if you're a tenant? How will they be registered in our domain?
Through the chair, I think it's the owner of the animal, the owner of the dog, actually. So as a tenant, they still need to register for the property that they're the occupier of, I would imagine.
That's a good question. Difficult one. Any further questions, councillors? If not, we'll put the recommendation about halfway down page 28. I'll look for a mover. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Bill and Councillor Dean. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Bill? Councillor Dean? Any further comments or questions, councillors? If not, put that recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on now to a waiver of a clause relating to the land management agreement, 6 Butler Crescent, Kapunda, on page 32, item number 13.2. The recommendation about halfway down the page. Are there any questions, councillors? Comments? It's pretty straightforward, I would think. There's a recommendation about halfway down the page. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Fabio, like to speak to that, Councillor Fabio? Someone like to second the motion? Councillor Simon, like to speak to that, Councillor Simon? No. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Hang on, that's the same one? A different one. Yeah, this next one is 13.3, councillors. It's a very similar motion to the previous one. Thought I was seeing things for a minute. But thank you, Sarah, for your report. Councillors, are there any questions or comments regarding the recommendation about halfway down page 36? Councillor?
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Would you like to talk to the motion? No. And Councillor Ellison, like to talk to that? No. Any further comments or questions, councillors? All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Collins, didn't see the light there.
So someone wants to build a house outside of what you're allowed to already on the Kidman estate. So they've gone to, just to make this clear in my own head, so they've gone to planning. Planning can't do this without the authorisation of the chamber to change the plan to a 2-storey house. But are the neighbours and everyone, so everyone's complied with all the other building regulations before it's got to us? I'm not going to get a phone call tomorrow and say I'm a wanker or anything. All right, no, that's all I was going to ask.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. I might put that to.
There's no assurance about the phone calls.
I was going to say, which question am I answering, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Thanks for the question, Councillor Collins. Yeah, no, this is because it's directly related to a land management agreement. So normally, you're right, it'd be assessed in relation to the code, and that would just be it. Since we happen to have provisions in a land management agreement, a long-standing one, I might add, that these particular proposals conflict with. But in the report, we foreshadowed that we might look at a process to actually address that as well separately. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Thanks, Councillor Collins. I'll put the motion now. Councillors, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, we're up to 13.4, consent to the deposit of a plan of a division development application, 5-6 numbers, it's 7 Cherry Street, Freeling. I think we've had this discussion in here, this chamber before in relation to the wheat fields in Freeling. Thank you, Councillor. Then would you like to speak to that? And would you like to second that, Councillor Peter? Like to speak to that? Any further comments or any comments, councillors, in relation to this? This is pretty straightforward and something that will be very well received by Wheatfields, I'm quite sure. If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Well, councillors, we move on now to section 13 of our agenda, which is probably the elephant in the room. It's the adoption of the 2024-25 annual business plan budget and the 24-34 long-term financial plan and the declaration of rates for 2024-25 and the adoption of the schedule of fees and charges for 24-25. Councillors, I'll open it for. Oh, look, just before we go into any questions or even adopting this particular matter, I might pass over to our CEO, Richard, just for a little bit of a brief overview of where we're up to. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bill. We were considering giving a presentation tonight, but I know that all of the elected members are very aware of the history of how we got here today. So I will just firstly thank Nigel and his team for all of the work that they've done. There is a significant amount that's gone into getting to where we are today, and Nigel very shortly will add just a little bit of extra information that he has since putting this report together last week. Very much everything you see in here is at the direction of council so far, and we very much stuck to that as we have. I think this budget and particularly the rating, if I focus on that as a starting point, the manner in which we've raised or used our strategic approach to raising the rates, I think has resulted in a fairness across all ratepayers and ensures that all ratepayers equally contribute to that rating. And I think that's, it's a really good principle that we've or that the elected members have directed us to use. So with that said, and following Nigel's short bit, we certainly do convey the budget to the elected members, and hopefully with the notion that we will have a very robust debate and adopt it later this evening. So with that said, I'll pass to Nigel to add those extra few bits in.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Nigel.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Three practical matters. As required, we'll present you with the latest valuation that's been received, which was yesterday. So the number that you'll adopt for next year will be that latest week 51 number. The latest valuations, both the total valuation and also the assessable rateable valuation, have been included in an updated recommendation that you will see on the screen. Slightly different to the report numbers, which were highlighted. The final amount received yesterday was a little bit of a surprise, in that very, very recently there was 50 new titles issued down at Roseworthy. So a super lot was subdivided and those titles issued. I suppose I was fairly sceptical that the valuer were going to get to valuing all of those in the very, very short time available, but it came through in yesterday's update. So that's why there's a reasonably significant increase, which you wouldn't normally see at this time of year. The difference, roughly, approximately, in rates is about $28,000 additional. That's not included in the budget per se, but what would be proposed is that we bring that additional amount into your first budget review for further consideration. The final practical matter is that we picked up a typo on the rate and the dollar on industry other. It's got an additional 1 in the report. The updated correct number, which was included in all the budget, documentation is included in the resolution on the screen. Thanks, Neville.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillors, I think I might open up this for discussion and just cause a suspend standing orders for 15 minutes. We can have just a round table discussion in relation to this and maybe ask a few questions from Nigel and staff. Would someone like to move that way? If you would like to have a suspense, thanks Councillor Lynn and Councillor Peter. I'd like to speak to that. No. I need 2/3 of the councillors to agree to suspend standing orders in order to discuss this matter. Do I have 2/3 of the council? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. That has to be 2/3. So I'm surprised, but nevertheless, I'm always a bit surprised. So we've suspended standing orders for 15 minutes to discuss this matter. No? Did that miss out?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, I'll need someone to move and second what? Oh, the recommendation itself. Okay. Would someone like to move the recommendation?
I just want to
Oh,
ask.
sorry, you have a question. Okay,
Yeah.
Councillor Michael.
Just in relation to the discretionary general rate rebates. So these are rebates that are provided at the discretion of the CEO. Yep.
Point of order? We haven't suspended standing orders, have we? That's what I was trying to do, actually. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I was trying to do that. There's a recommendation on page 14. Before we can debate that recommendation, it's got to be put. I wanted to suspend standing orders in order to ask questions informally, but that was defeated, as I see. So you're quite correct, Councillor Collin. We have a recommendation on page 14. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, do I have a seconder? Don't have a seconder.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bill. Would you like to speak to a Councillor Dean? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. We've had a very long and involved process for this budget, and it's been a difficult one. As far as I see, the aim of the budget process was simultaneously to produce a balanced budget with a small operating surplus, fulfil all council service and project obligations, limit rate increases to that outlined in the long-term financial plan, and remain economically sustainable. I think this budget does that. It's been made fairly difficult by quite a few other pressures. One is that the revaluation of our assets led to a 2.317 million or 37% increase in depreciation, which we had to cover, either by extra revenue or expense changes. We've had high-level government inflation. Last year's budget was less than that. We've had high energy costs, construction costs, and insurances, all of which have made for a pretty challenging environment. Our employee costs are going to go up considerably. We don't know how much yet, but we know that it's going to be more than 5%. We need to fully fund the IAMP, and that's been made more difficult by the increase in the depreciation amount and the high cost for construction. And much of the slack was taken out of the budget last year, so we've got little room to move. Which leads me to the conclusion that the 4.5% average increase that is in this budget is as low as we can get it and still deliver what we have to deliver, bearing in mind that there's a shortfall of $390,000 that hasn't been funded on revenue collected, and that arose from a motion to do with service levels, which we passed earlier. I support the response to the extreme volatility of the Value General's property valuations this year. I've actually did an analysis of a couple of alternative responses. One was making a large decrease in the primary production multiplier, currently 77%, and, for example, dropping that down to 70%. And my conclusion from that was that given that a large number of primary producers in the vineyard area had reductions in their valuation from 4 to 8%, that would lead to a reduction in their rates of around about 20%. It wouldn't have a significant impact, have some impact, people with large valuation increases, but not as much as the preferred response that we have in this budget, which is the rate capping, rate rebate for people who have a rate increase, valuation increase over 12%. And which basically means that no one who didn't have a rebate last year will get a rate increase of more than 4.2%, because the rebate will kick in at that level. The disadvantage of what we proposed is that only applies for 1 year, and what happens the next year. I've done some calculations, which I won't go into, of how that plays out in various circumstances. That leads me to the belief that it's probably not feasible to do it this year, but in future it would be useful to look at phasing that rebate out over 2 years. So in other words, in the second year, maybe give half the rebate or half the rebate to those who had a significant increase. We need to work out the criteria for that. Now, if we do that, that is not in accordance with the current policy this year, and would need a fair bit of work to get it in a good position. And the other thing, of course, is that we would have to fund that by increasing the rates for other people somehow, which would be a significant rejig, possibly, depending on how much that amount is, and we don't know how much. I don't know how much that is. So, given all that, it's a difficult situation. I think we've balanced all the factors very well. We've all had input over several meetings, many meetings, and therefore I'm very happy to move this recommendation for the budget and annual business plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dean. I have a seconder for that, was Councillor Bill. You'd like to speak to that, Councillor Bill?
Sorry, Bill.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak to it. I feel quite comfortable with the budget. I've been through the figures, had some questions I've had answered, and I feel that we've reached a very reasonable budget given the situation, particularly when you look around the increases in other council areas. We are in a really enviable position. And I was really following up from Dean's comments about the capping situation. The example given on page 9 is pretty fantastic, that people with a 20% increase in their rate, in their valuation, can come down to have a 4% increase in rates payable is a pretty good balancing thing to go on. I don't know if any of you saw you happened to get the stock journal, but there was an item today about land valuations in rural areas, and the graph is somewhat horrific. They're talking about land values of $15,000 an acre in the peri-urban areas of Adelaide, coming up towards Freeling and Kapunda. So the amount of primary production land values are in scary astronomical areas. So we've sort of got to, if we can ease that pressure, I think it's fantastic. So I commend the budget to the chamber, and I thank Nigel for all his work and efforts in doing it. It's been great to work with them, I think. So I think we're very lucky to have a budget like this in a year like this.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bill. Are there any further comments or questions, councillors? No comments? No questions? If there are no questions or comments, I need to put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? The recommendation is lost. Councillors, where to from here? We've had 10 meetings in relation to this budget, 10. And we still can't come to a conclusion. I must feel disappointed indeed. Just don't understand. Must move on. Mission was lost.
I think before we move on, we are at a point where a decision is needed to be made, one way or another, to either adopt the budget or to provide some extremely clear direction via way of a motion for an alternative to be developed.
I think that's a very fair comment and a fairly obvious one, to be honest. Where to from here, councillors, as I mentioned before? We've got nothing on the table now at all.
Sorry, you jumped in because I was going to call for a division on it, but we're probably
A division on
the vote.
on the vote. Well, I think we can still do that if that's your wish. All those members who voted for the motion, will they stand behind their seats, please? Thanks, councillors. Be recorded in the minutes. Okay. Where to from here, councillors? What do you want to do? Do you want to have another meeting, a special meeting of council, to talk about what and where to start? I commend Nigel and his team for this extraordinary amount of work that was put into this. Right from day one, we've been not bombarded with information, but we've had a lot of information, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. We've got to a reasonable level where a decision could be made. Instead, we think it's still not right. Well, what we've got to work out now is what's not right about it. Is there any aspect that's so totally wrong? Councillor Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Bill. I think, look, back in April, I suggested a workshop, and council elected to proceed with a special council meeting, which I didn't agree with, and I was unable to attend. I guess I make a number of observations about the budget, which I've made at the request of the CEO following the April meeting. I put those observations in email, and I don't see that those things have been addressed in a material sense in the budget. My view is that there are opportunities to reduce spending that aren't being realised in here, and the rates are a function of spending. My view is that we could be more aggressive in terms of the reduction in the rate and the dollar that we could be providing to ratepayers. And I've made some comments already earlier in the meeting about, you know, the relative cost of, say, for example, the commercial rate, which isn't sort of a major source of revenue for the council, but it's a disincentive for people setting up businesses here. I don't like rebates as a matter of principle. I hate buying a microwave from a retailer and being told if I send a form in, I can get $50 back on the hope that they never have to pay me. You know, to me, a more aggressive approach in reducing the rate in the dollar with an automated rebate system for, you know, anything over, say, 10% increase in property value without the need for a landowner or whatever to apply for it would be more palatable for me. I've asked questions about the amount of money that the council's spending on IT costs. So when I went through the detail, I came to a figure of about 1.5 million annually, which seemed like a big number for what we are. I've made comments previously about council purchasing plant. So look, I mean, in terms of moving forward, those are all things that can be ventilated, I think, in a workshop. And I just don't see how those comments that I've made previously have been addressed in the budget.
Further comments, questions, councillors? Councillor Collins?
What I'd like to say is I agree with Michael. I think the special meeting we had, I found was not helpful at all. I felt myself we were told, rehashed all old things which we'd been told. We weren't to ask questions, and I was of the opinion that we were going to actually have an input of what we could do to change the budget in the future. I didn't consider we had the opportunity to do that, so I thought that was a lost opportunity. But there's, I strongly disagree with the big rate rebate because it's going to embed that high value. I do agree with Bill, made a very good observation that where we live is a problem because agricultural land or prime production land is being bought for other purposes. So we're going to have to look at having other ways to value prime production land, and it makes it very hard. So if you look at the land that was sold at Roseworthy, it was not being bought for primary production purposes. So it makes it very hard for all primary producers to compete with commercial rates. So we're going to have to look at that in the future, maybe not this year, but I do personally agree in principle with what Michael is saying, that if you drop down to maybe 15%, something like that, and then anyone that's over a very high percentage, then they get the rebate. The argument that someone that Dean suggested that the person who pays less rates than last year because his property value's gone down, well, it's a rate, it's a wealth tax. So if your wealth goes down, your tax goes down. That's how the system's designed. And if you think that's a failing, that their vineyard's gone in half in value and they should pay the same amount of tax, you could argue that the value of the vineyard's halved, so they pay half the amount of tax. So that could be argued in reverse, but I'd support a workshop. I think there's input that we'd all like to have.
Thanks, Councillor Collins. Any further, councillors? Councillor Peter.
I have a conundrum, or see a conundrum, and that is the valuer general raises the assessments.
Yes.
Therefore, logically, the rates have to increase. Now, I think that is false. as I understand it, under the Local Government Act, councils have to fix their rate in the dollar. And this is historically in this council, over many years, I've seen the argument put that, or the implication rather, that the Valuer General sets the rates. Also, I think it's a falsehood, and I've seen this repeated over and over again, that rates are an index of wealth. Now, certainly if you look at, and I'm talking about the agricultural situation, if you look at the agricultural picture, sheep are down, wool's down, beef's down. It hasn't rained. I go through the Barossa Valley and I see vineyards in the floor of the valley in my ward where the leaves are coming off, and I see rows and rows of what I presume are Shiraz grapes unharvested. Now, I think that the index of wealth, practically speaking, is a falsehood. And I think that really as a council, we should get about the task, not of mimicking the decisions of the Valuer General, but taking the Valuer General's figures and then setting the rate in the dollar according to our own economic situation. And I feel that isn't being done. So that's my comment.
I think that's fair observation, Councillor Peter. Going back to what Councillor Collins said earlier, though, regrettably, and we all know that this is a wealth tax that the Valuer General puts on. You've made some very, very good observations there, and perhaps we do need to open our mind to looking at the facts as they are. We know it's a wealth tax. What are we going to do about it? I think like you, I think we've accepted that over a period of time, and we've set our rates accordingly. Maybe we just have to do things a little bit differently in the future. That's not going to do much for us at this present time, but I think your observations are on the money. I really do. Councillor Dean.
Just a question, Mayor Bill. Have we suspended standing orders, or what is the status of this discussion?
Well, that's.
I'm somewhat confused. We seem to be rambling around in circles, achieving precious little.
That's it.
But I'd just like to make a point that Nigel has done an excellent job over a long period of time explaining to us how rates are determined, and he's made very clear that we have to use some form of valuation, and we've chosen to use the Valuer General as the best of a bad lot. And we also have acknowledged that this is a very crude way of setting rates, but we're stuck with it. And so what we try to do, and what we tried to do in this budget proposal, is use some band-aids, and the band-aid being the rebate to even out some of the variations. But we really need to decide, are we going to suspend standing orders, or are we going to go away and think about it and come back for a workshop or what? But I don't want this discussion to go around the circles for more than another minute.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dean. You're quite correct. The motion was lost to suspend standing orders. So we go back to our normal meeting procedures now. I think we've had a fair go. I'll take one more from Councillor Michael.
Yeah, sorry, just a comment. I mean, I challenge the proposition that it's a wealth tax. I mean, it's a charge for a service that local government is required to provide. It is not a wealth tax, and I certainly wouldn't support setting rating policy around the idea that you pay more because your land has gone up in value. That's not the way it works at all. It's there to fund services. The other part of it, I would say, is that, you know, the council has the ability to set rates as it sees fit. I believe the words are in the Act, and nowhere in the Act does it discuss rates being based on wealth or whatever. It does speak about the value of general. But yeah, I don't think we should be going into this workshop discussion or whatever the next steps look like on the premise that it's a wealth tax. To address Councillor Dean's point, my view remains that a workshop would be the next logical step to try and progress this. Yeah,
Just a moment, if I can just speak.
CEO Richard, please.
Thank you. It feels like we've got a lot of information in front of us at the moment, and there are probably two components to the decision that the elected members are required to make. One is around the rates and the amount of revenue that we raise, and the other is on the expense side. From the revenue side, there are two different methods that really can be used. One is a straight rate in the dollar, and we've certainly heard different views over the journey that people have. And the other, of course, is the rate in the dollar with the rebate. And I think in both instances, the amount of rates that different land use categories would pay has been highlighted. It feels like there's enough information here for us to make decisions. And if the decision is that we don't want a rebate, then we can probably look at what that would mean from an income point of view. And I suspect that we may be able to do that quite quickly. In fact, Nigel may have a plan B to give some guidance to assist the elected members in making that decision. And that would certainly work from the revenue side of things. So, Nigel, do you have that information available?
Mayor Bill, the other alternative would have been to revert back to the original budget proposition. And I just remind members that when the budget was approved for consultation, we had a rate reduction from the rate in the dollars of the previous year of 10% across the board, built into that structure. What we were requested to do that night was to also consider applying a rebate for very high value increases. Now, what enables you to do that is that your rate revenue policy, which has been consulted with the community and endorsed by this council, says that each year the council may consider whether the situation is such that you need to apply that rebate. Now, analysing the very, very high increases in primary production led to a further meeting and further analysis of the impact of that. And it was suggested to you that one way to assist with that extremely volatile primary production value increases would be to apply a 12% threshold regarding the valuation, which you approved. And based on that approval is what was presented to you tonight. Now, what I started out saying was that if you are collectively against applying a rebate, then you can revert to the original proposition of, instead of the 7% reduction across the board in terms of the rate in the dollar, you could revert back to the 10% reduction in the rate in the dollar. Now, that certainly doesn't address all the concerns that I've heard raised in the last half hour, but it's certainly an alternative that would be available to, or at least as a starting point for further consideration. It's probably worth saying that, Councillor Michael, in terms of an automatic rebate, we would face some challenges, but I only highlight that because others probably think that the rebate was a reasonable way to go. But the challenges you face are in a council that's experienced significant increase in growth of new properties and new construction. But the difficulties of separating that out is quite high. It's very easy to say, well, we had no value for that one last year. It's a completely new property. That's easy to see. But what's more difficult, especially in that Roseworthy region and to some extent Kidman Rise here, is when a house was, say, 70% completed at the last valuation, and it's 100% completed this year. It's very, very difficult for us to actually see that the increase in the valuation is as a result of the value going up, or it was simply because the bill got finished. So we don't necessarily have the detailed information to tell that automated. But considering that there doesn't seem to be support by a rebate, that's probably irrelevant. So as I said, the other option, which we could certainly put on the screen if you wanted to view it, would be the rate in the dollars, with going back to the original proposition of a 10% reduction across the board, which would achieve the same budget outcome. And the only thing you'd see that's identical in that proposition is the landscape levy, which wouldn't change under any situation.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Can we put that up on the screen? That's it there.
Why couldn't you go more than -10? Why can't you go more than -10?
Wouldn't be sustainable.
Wouldn't be sustainable.
The long-term financial plan wouldn't be sustainable.
What if you cut spending?
As highlighted earlier in the evening, we're already looking at approximately 400,000 in savings to be achieved to balance the budget. So we've got to achieve that first before we'd be looking at any other spending. And as also heard earlier, you've already passed a resolution that said to review spending levels, you'll review service levels. That resolution's still there for us to follow up on, which requires a report from the CEO to consider it. That seemed to be a fairly practical way of going about it, which was accepted by the council.
We've got a trouble there, haven't we? If we've got a 6-3 vote, obviously the budget hasn't been accepted, has it? So there's a fair difference in the number. So it's a concern if we're going to change something quite dramatically, wouldn't you say? Like it's it was even, an even vote. Like 6-3 is quite a strong dissenting vote. So it means that something's not quite right, doesn't it?
Yeah, through the chair, I think it has certainly been very well heard. I think what Nigel's trying to explain is that reducing your revenue is going to require the long-term financial plan to be redone, and the compounding effect of that loss of revenue will impact
on the council's budget for quite a long time to a significant level. The question for the elected members is it willing to make that decision in advance of receiving a proper report, giving consideration to the service levels that you're looking to achieve? Passing the budget in the way that it was done and proposed will not impact on that report into service levels being undertaken, and it will not impact on the opportunity to actually cut that spending through the year before it's done. If there is a surplus that then flows from that, it will simply reduce our borrowings. And that can't be a bad thing. But in terms of providing certainty to the community on the establishment of the rates, I think you've got an opportunity now to, to look at whether that can move forward in advance of that service review being undertaken.
Thank you, Richard. That's a fair comment.
Mr Mayor?
Councillor Lynn?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, would a workshop achieve what we want to do and come back with the reduction in expenses? Could we do it without and have a workshop? Would that be a help?
As Nigel said, the expenses that have been forecast in the budget will need to be reduced by $400,000 to achieve the revenue. So if you cut it, let's just say you cut it and go, well, let's double that. If you want to pull it out, so you go, you need to find $1 million in savings, it will impact on the service levels. Because that's what you'd be looking at. What we're saying is we're already going to reduce the expenses by $400,000. We have to, because we've embedded that into the budget process. So if you want to save another $400,000 and make it $800,000, it will start impacting.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Lynn?
Yeah, but you didn't answer my question about the workshop. Well, I'm just asking.
Oh, I know, I'm just asking.
You're laughing.
I'm not laughing.
The workshop would be valuable in determining the service levels that elected members wish that you wish to be reported on.
Councillor Michael?
So Mayor Bill, can I move a motion that we hold a workshop on the 16th of July, preferably during the day here at Kapunda, where we can go through this in more detail and perhaps give the staff some time to perhaps come forearmed with discussion points and data. Should it be a conversation potentially around, I mean, I don't necessarily accept that it means, service levels need to drop, but I'm all ears, and I don't think we're going to get that granular information sitting here tonight talking about it. So can I just move a motion that we hold a workshop on the 16th of July?
Thanks, Councillor Michael. You've spoken to that motion. Do I have a seconder? Yep. Just going to check the date, Councillor Ali. Nigel, how's that date fit? theory is we might need to, if you want this workshop, it might need to be done a little quicker than that.
What time would that meeting be? I've got a medical appointment in Adelaide during the day and wouldn't be available during the day.
You were seconding that motion, councillor Evans? I think the motion was seconded by councillor Allison.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to speak against the motion. Where's this special workshop going to get us? When is, if we have something come out of it, where does it go to the next July meeting to come through? Is that the plan? Or is it, you know, where are we going with it? What's the draft to it? I just think we'll talk round and round. We've got to come up with a sustainable motion at the end, sustainable budget. And I'm really concerned that we won't do that. I know that. I don't care. I'm not talking about the votes. I'm talking about the council producing a sustainable budget. And I just don't think we're going to do it if we rip it apart. Oh, yeah, well, that's right. But if the 5 votes produce a non-sustainable motion, we're in deep shit.
Yeah.
No, I know that. So why are we having a workshop? That's my whole point. We can't. Where are we going to get? Nowhere. Sorry, I've got the floor. So my concern is where's this actually going? Is it going to get us anywhere? Because we need to get something to talk about then. A special talk about is just a workshop. Is just round around circles.
Yeah, thanks, councillor Bill. We do have a motion here. I guess that's where we're up to.
I'd like to speak against the motion too.
Yep,
Yeah,
thank
Bill.
you, councillor Dean.
I think having observed what's happened over the course of this budget process, that another workshop would be an absolute waste of time. as all the other things we've done beforehand has been a waste of time. We have had a process which, where we develop policies, things which we've been followed, staff have followed. They've presented to us at every step of the way options. We voted on those. They religiously followed those options. Some people disagree with them, but there were majority votes in all cases. So on the basis of that information, we produced, the staff produced a budget proposal which exactly followed what we told them to do, or majority vote on every single occasion, and then we don't pass it. That smacks to me of incompetence, of absolute cowboy behaviour, in that we have thrown the policies out the window. We've thrown the guidance we've given them out of the window, which is an absolute insult to our staff. And I am absolutely disgusted. Another workshop will be more of the same rubbish.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Councillor Collins?
I'd put the motion, thank you.
I need a second up. Corey, if you may, it was councillor Lid, councillor Ellison, sorry. Yeah, that's it. That's right. Councillors, we have a motion on the screen. I think that's pretty straightforward, councillors. It's the motion be put. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So there'll be a workshop. Can we have that?
The motion we put, Mr. Mayor.
That's a what?
Just put the votes now.
Put the vote.
Oh, okay. I see. That's what I thought we were doing. Never mind. We'll find the motion now and we'll put that, which is the one on top of it. Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder, Councillor Michael and Councillor Ellison. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors.
Excuse me, Mayor Bill.
I won't be here for the 16th, as you're well aware. Councillor Simon will be chairing that meeting and or that workshop or briefing session, as it's been labelled. And then I guess the thought needs to go into what you're going to do about it. Councillor Bill raised an extremely good point, as did Councillor Dean, in terms of we've had 10 meetings and we're to this stage. So we must get something out of this particular briefing session. So what's that going to be, councillors? Is it going to be a special meeting the day after? Special meeting after the briefing session? Or what? Otherwise we're just going nowhere. Any thoughts?
I want to call a division,
The division what for?
or for the last vote. Or not?
That was only to put the motion. The other one? Well, if you can do that, all of those who voted for the motion, can you stand behind your seats, please? That's the top motion there. Extraordinary. Thanks, councillors. So the end outcome is we'll have that briefing session on the 16th of July. Where will that be held and at what time? We didn't consider that, did we?
You did say that.
I did, yeah, I said Kapunda, and during the day was a preference, but I guess we'll leave it to governance to carry or to circulate that with members, and we've got a date. If I may, Mayor Bill, just respond to some of the questions that you had before.
Just briefly on this though, I think we might get some indication of how many people are going to be able to be at this briefing session and at what time it's going to be. And we've agreed that it'll be in Kapunda, but we need a time and an indication of who can attend. Otherwise, there's no point having it. We don't even get a quorum. What, we're going away to have a briefing session where? Kapunda? What time? Don't know. Well, that needs to be a council decision. 5 o'clock?
Mayor Bill, can I suggest 5 o'clock?
Thank you, Councillor Ellison. At 5 o'clock? Do we have a basic agreement on that, councillors? All right, 5 o'clock. We can put that in the minutes. At Kapunda. Okay. Any further comments or questions on that, councillors? Just Councillor Michael.
Just a comment, Mayor Bill. I don't think we should get too emotional about the decision that been made and in respect to Councillor Dean's comments. I don't think there's no question that the staff put a lot of effort into preparing these for us, and I don't think we're sitting here saying that that's not the case. But I would say, but I will say this: I do feel like I've raised things a number of times, and they just don't find their way into the information that's presented. So I made it clear what my view was on the rate. I made it clear what my views were on the IT costs. I made it clear what my views were on a number of things, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So then we get to this point, and it gets, for me personally, I vote against it because it's not what it's not what I wanted to see. And I'm being asked to vote on it, and so I voted accordingly. I don't think we should get too wound up about it being disgusted by decision. I mean, this is a democratic process, right? This is our job. This is why we're here to vote on the budget, and that's what we've done. And we've provided feedback on it in the meantime, and I think it's no more than that. And we will get somewhere with the workshop. My view is with the workshop, we'll be able to talk in a freer way about some of these things, whether it's a 10% or a 15% reduction in the rate. What does that look like? What does an automatic rebate look like? Can we reduce the commercial rate? What's the impact on service delivery, if any? Is there a line that we cross? That's what I want to get out of it. So that's why I think it's a good way of moving it forward.
Just a question though, do you think a workshop like this could end up increasing the rates?
No, I don't think so, no.
Why not?
Why would we? Given we've just voted and voted.
The areas there that we haven't included in the budget, we should have.
Well,
there's obviously things in there that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So there must be areas where the things should be.
I guess if a budget came back with rates going up again, then I'd be voting against it. So it'd be up to other elected members to make that decision.
No, that's fair. Just a point. Okay, councillors, I think we've probably done this one. And you've got something to look forward to, and Nigel's got quite a considerable amount of work to undertake in the meantime, I guess, to put up some different models. And staff members, of course, will have to look at their budgets and look at them very carefully and ensure that what they've requested to be in that budget can be justified. And I have no problem with that. I think that's fair. But there is going to be some considerable work to be undertaken between now and the 16th, which is not that far away. All right, councillors, any further questions or comments in relation to the budget? Doesn't sound like it. Without being too rattled, I'll just work out where we are. I think we're on to 13.6 somewhere. Because it's a rate basis. Right. Okay. Yes. This is not, is this 13.6? 13.6 has been drawn. Yes. So 13.6 councillors has been withdrawn. That was 13. So where are we? Oh,
Questions on notice, Mr Mayor?
what's that? Councillors, questions on notice. Do we have any questions on notice? Or questions without notice? Motions on notice? I do have a motion without notice here. It's from Councillor Dean. You might be aware that a little time back we had Uniting Care speak at council here, and with the issues they had with keeping their program afloat because of the church being sold. And we were scouting around looking for other venues that could possibly suit them to be able to provide the very valuable services they provide to the underprivileged and homeless and other people. There's a motion here with the background that says, Uniting Care spoke to council recently about the need for a new base of operations due to the sale of the Uniting Church buildings. Uniting Care have been working with council staff to come up with a temporary base of operations until they can find something more permanent, and have settled on the Soldiers Memorial Hall kitchen for the preparation of the Friday lunch program. Using the hall for dining and a room behind the stage to use for the storage and distribution of food 3 times weekly for persons in need. This room needs some maintenance work to be made suitable for purpose, and could also be used for counselling sessions if needed. This group performs a very necessary social purpose. They are required to vacate the existing location on the coming weekend, which is this weekend, so the situation is urgent. Regrettably, Dean was given very little notice for this happening, hence the lateness of this motion. But the motion reads, the council approved the hire of the Kapunda Soldiers Memorial Hall to Uniting Care Group, specifically the use of the room behind the stage in the Soldiers Memorial Hall for food storage and distribution to the needy, and the kitchen and hall on Fridays for a lunch program. Further, that the hire be permitted for a period of 12 months, with fees waived to allow time to obtain a permanent base, with a review at the end of 12 months if required, and its council's contribution to its social support function, that minor maintenance and repairs be undertaken as necessary to ensure the spaces are fit for purpose. I think that's a fairly straightforward request. It's whether the council believes it's appropriate use of the hall, which I might add is not used all that often, nowhere near as often as it should be, and whether we want to discuss this further. Councillor Dean?
Maybe I'm happy to move that motion, which should be up on the screen hopefully soon, as I emailed them. Unfortunately, I only received a phone call about this matter around about lunchtime today, and I had to contact some people on council, including Megan, to try and get some more information about it. But this is a service that is really needed in this area, and it's well supported. There's people accessing the food, free food, which is donated by various supermarkets and other businesses, not just from Kapunda, but even from outside our council area. And that is a really important service, but if they don't have a place to go, that will cease. And that will be the hardship to those people who rely on it. And they did try, you may recall in the presentation, they were looking at the parish hall. That turned out to not be available, so that was closed to them. And people from Uniting Care have been working closely with Justin to come up with possible alternative, and that's the one that they've come up with. One of our purposes is to provide a bit of a social function, and here all we're doing is helping another organisation do that in a way better than we could do.
Thank you.
And a lot less cost to us. So I think that waiving the fees and the small amount of maintenance is probably something that's within the capability of council without too much problem.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Colin and myself have been trying to do some work on this, and I thank you for that, Colin. You know, they presented here with a heavy heart that they were here, and they do an excellent job. I've had some experience with them, and we've looked at just about every alternative in the town, even as far out as the trotting track, which would people there would be very generous, but it's just too far out of the town to be suitable for to be able to operate from. We've got this facility; it's underutilised. There's no question about that. So we've got this opportunity to consider this motion. Would someone like to second the motion? Oh, Councillor Fabio, would you like to speak on this? Yep, no, thank you, Councillor Fabio. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Oh, that's terrific. That's a great way to finish our general meeting for tonight. Thank you, councillors, and I'm sure you'll make a lot of people extremely happy. And thank you, Councillor Dean, for going to the trouble of preparing all of this. And we've got to go into confidential very shortly. I'm not sure if you want to close the tea.
Didn't see one.
I didn't get them. What are we going to do? Curry.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. We've carried that, so we're moving on. So I would ask if there is any other motions without notice.
Oh, of course. Are there any other motions without notice, councillors? Forgive me for that. If not, we move on.
I don't know if you class it as a motion without notice. You do. Can you put it up on the screen?
Well, thank you, Councillor Peter. Would you like to speak to that motion?
No, I think it's pretty obvious, and as an elected council, we should know what council owns in terms of properties particularly untenanted vacant properties and also vacant land. And I suppose that we'd have that at the next council meeting. We wouldn't. Why is there secrecy? Oh. Very well.
All right, I've got a mover. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, councillor Allison. Would you like to speak to that? Okay, we probably have, but we've got to pull it all together. It takes time. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. And we're going to our confidential section, councillors. We haven't got a lot in there. Would you like us to continue and yeah, I think we can get through it fairly quickly. First one, I need a mover and a second that we go into confidence. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, councillor Allison. Someone like to second that? Councillor Lynn. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried.